Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Just like that, out of nowhere, Charleston White stormed into the spotlight, screaming David's innocence and flashing receipts nobody expected. Evidence so bold it shook the whole case and made people question everything they thought was already written in stone. When the story first broke, that a dismembered body was found stuffed inside a Tesla registered to rising rap star David, the internet lost its mind. Accusations exploded, wild theories shot across every platform, and headlines crowned him guilty before cops even made a single move. Fans tore into each other online, some swearing his lyrics were secret confessions, while big brands dropped him on the spot just to protect their image. But right in the middle of that chaos stood one man who didn't flinch, Charleston White. Known for his brutal honesty, no-filter rants, and wild takes, Charleston stunned the world by saying the unthinkable.
Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
The 20-year-old rapper was innocent. He even claimed the clearest proof of David's innocence was the fact that he hadn't been arrested. Let that sink in. Charleston didn't just rant, he broke it down with street logic. He reminded everyone that in America, especially for young black men, cops don't wait for proof. They throw people behind bars with way less evidence every single day. They arrest with way less evidence, he snapped. They'll put him in jail just to hold him. And if police really had something solid on David, Charleston swore he'd already be locked in a cell. To him, the lack of charges wasn't the calm before the storm. It was the biggest sign there was no storm coming at all.
If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long? They got out. So think about this.
And to really drive it home, he dropped one of those raw, gritty analogies that hit people straight in the gut. Charleston pointed out the obvious. If it had been a regular person linked to a dead body, they'd already be cuffed, booked, and hidden away. But David, he was still free, still touring, still showing up in public like nothing happened. And Charleston swore that reality screamed louder than any rumor, headline, or online chatter could ever do. And Charleston wasn't letting up. He went straight for the jugular, ripping apart the claims that David was tangled up with a younger girl and her tragic fate.
So think about this. If they got all this information on him dating a minor, an underage kid, and she looked like a white girl, mixed girl, what they let just stay free like this?
Social media was drowning in rumors. Matching tattoos, leaked photos, even fans dissecting lyrics like they were coded confessions. But Charleston wasn't buying it. And he sure wasn't letting the internet play judge, jury, and executioner without real proof. He called the whole story way too polished, like a script written to frame a villain. A young black star tied to a missing 15-year-old, with evidence sprinkled in just neat enough to make him look guilty. Yet still, no arrest, not even a quick detainment. To Charleston, that silence from law enforcement didn't scream cover-up. It screamed doubt that David was the monster people painted him to be. And Charleston didn't sugarcoat a single word. He made his audience face the ugliest truth. He reminded everyone that the body wasn't just discovered. It was chopped up, butchered, and hidden in a way that screamed pure cruelty. Then he hit the raw question. Was David even capable of something that twisted, or was somebody else pulling the strings? Could this entire thing be a setup? They got all this evidence to say he did it. Body sliced up, butchered, and still no arrest. Charleston's words ripped through X, YouTube, and Instagram like a firestorm. To some, he was defending the indefensible, protecting a man whose car held a teen's remains. But to others, he was the only voice bold enough to say what they'd been whispering, that maybe this case wasn't so clear-cut after all.
So you mean to tell me OJ was found with a bloody glove, he was arrested immediately? Immediately, with all the circumstantial evidence they found on OJ, they placed it. So you mean to tell me they got all of this on this and he still get to move freely amongst America?
And he didn't just drop one hot take and disappear. He kept hammering it home. To Charleston, it wasn't just odd that David hadn't been cuffed. It was downright impossible to believe the story being pushed. He even threw in one of the most infamous legal comparisons of all time, the O.J. Simpson trial. He reminded viewers that cops throw people in jail daily over the flimsiest scraps of evidence. So if the case against David was supposedly stacked, why hadn't the same happened here?
So I'm saying, let me think outside the box. Maybe his mama done it. Maybe her mama done it and set him up. Maybe one of them racist uncles or cousins don't like a maybe the other boyfriend done it. Maybe the pimp who was sex trafficking her for the last year when she ran away done it.
From there, Charleston's theories turned even darker. He started sketching out chilling what-ifs, painting scenarios where someone else could have been behind the crime, ideas that shook people and showed exactly how little faith he had in the official story. These weren't courtroom statements dressed up by slick lawyers. They were wild, uncut shots fired into the public like live grenades. And that's why Charleston's words cut so deep. He wasn't chained by evidence rules or soft legal talk. He spoke raw, reckless, and blazing with fire, and that's exactly what made the streets lean in. To him, the whole case was shaky from the start.
And I know they said, man, he wrong for calling her a little hoe, but she was. Little girl don't run away from home, little hoes and little shit.
He even laughed at the idea that David's bond with the victim was some open and shut fact. Charleston tore into the so-called matching tattoos that had gone viral. David and the 15-year-old girl with the same little mark inked on their index fingers. Fans swore it was a smoking gun of intimacy, but Charleston wasn't buying it. To him, it was weak, flimsy, and another media trick designed to bury David before he ever saw a courtroom. Then came the line that blew the internet wide open, the most jaw-dropping part of Charleston's defense. He turned his criticism straight toward the girl, dropping words so sharp they cut the crowd in half. He made it clear he thought David was being played as the perfect scapegoat, and whether people liked it or not, he wasn't scared to say it out loud. That one statement hit like a bombshell, sparking rage and debate everywhere. Critics went off, accusing him of victim blaming and excusing David by throwing dirt on someone who couldn't defend herself. But Charleston's supporters clapped back hard, saying he wasn't excusing anything. He was flipping the script, daring people to question whether the story being fed to them was way too one-sided. For Charleston, ugly questions were better than blind acceptance, and he drilled the racial angle until it became the backbone of his case. Over and over, he reminded the world, they don't let black men walk away from crimes like this in America. That line echoed across timelines, podcasts, and live streams, becoming the heart of his logic. To him, the proof was right in front of everyone's face. David was still free. No mugshot, no cuffs, no prison bars, just a young black rapper still breathing fresh air, still moving outside like nothing happened. And Charleston swore that alone spoke louder than any headline could ever scream. And that's exactly why Charleston stood out in the chaos. While everybody else obsessed over leaked pics, tattoos, and cryptic bars, Charleston zoomed out and aimed at the bigger picture: race, justice, and how the system usually treats young black men under a spotlight. By now, he wasn't just poking holes in the case, he was ripping it apart piece by piece, daring anyone to prove him wrong. And he spoke with the fire of a man who had studied injustice his entire life. To him, this wasn't just about one rapper. It was about a system that never plays fair, with black men suddenly acting too fair in a case built for a lightning-fast conviction. Charleston's take flipped logic on its head. Where most people saw a body in David's Tesla, whispers of a relationship with a minor, and lyrics that sounded like confessions as proof of guilt, he saw innocence. Why? Because if David really was guilty, Charleston swore the system would have slammed him in cuffs on day one. It was a wild contradiction. But that's why people leaned in. Charleston didn't deny the evidence existed. He said there was too much. So much stacked against David that the fact he was still walking free was the most suspicious part. His twist was ruthless. The mountain of so-called evidence was the very reason it had to be a setup. And then Charleston took it darker, asking the questions most wouldn't dare whisper. What if this wasn't David's crime at all? What if the whole thing was staged? A perfect-looking frame-up that crumbled once you dug deeper? Those what-ifs sent the internet into overdrive, sparking a digital showdown between Charleston's believers and his haters. Plenty called him reckless, irresponsible, even dangerous for pushing that narrative. But others, they nodded, remembering every messy celebrity scandal riddled with cover-ups and dirty setups before. And Charleston, knowing exactly how to keep the fire blazing, circled back again and again to one line nobody could brush off. "David's still free," Charleston shouted. "They say he was with a 13-year-old girl. They say she's gone. They say all this evidence points to him. But no arrest? You expect me to believe that? Nah." To Charleston, the answer was plain as day. David didn't do it. That was the hill he was ready to stand on no matter what came his way. And he knew the firestorm was coming. People blasted him for downplaying a child's death, for excusing behavior nobody should ever excuse. But Charleston wasn't scared of backlash. He fed on it. While social media tore itself in half over whether he was exposing the hard truth or just stirring chaos for clout, Charleston only got louder, doubling down harder every time. He told his audience to rewind history. Think about every case where young black men got hauled into courtrooms on nothing but whispers. locked up on maybe and probably, while their lives were destroyed in an instant. And now, here was a case dripping with DNA claims, tattoo rumors, incriminating lyrics, a body in a Tesla, and viral headlines. Yet David was still free? To Charleston, that wasn't luck. That was proof of innocence. For millions scrolling online, his words hit different. They stopped, replayed, and asked themselves, what if Charleston was actually making sense? What if all this smoke really had no fire at all? But Charleston's defense of David didn't just pop out of nowhere. To see why his voice went viral, why his takes could spark millions of comments, and why even his wildest claims carried weight, you gotta know who he is. Because Charleston White ain't just some guy with a mic. He's controversy walking, a man whose life is crime, redemption, hypocrisy, and chaos all rolled into one explosive package. Born in Texas in 1977, Charleston's story turned dark early. By 14, he was already caught up in a violent altercation outside a Foot Locker, one that left a man dead. He was tried as an adult, convicted of unaliving, and locked away until he turned 21. That one moment scarred him forever, not just with a record, but with a reputation that critics say proves he's got no moral ground to stand on. But to Charleston, that scar became fuel, the very fire that drives his mission today. When Charleston got out, he tried flipping the script. He stepped into activism, even founding the Hypocrisy Over Politics, HOPI, organization to pull kids away from gangs and street life. For a second, it looked like he was chasing redemption, turning scars into lessons for the next generation. But Charleston White was never built for peace and quiet. His mouth was too reckless, his presence too loud, his energy too explosive. Instead of fading into the background, he lit himself up like a torch and jumped straight into the spotlight, not as a role model, but as a walking lightning rod. By the 2020s, his name was infamous, known for ruthless honesty, a take-no-prisoner style, and a habit of calling out anybody who crossed his radar. Rappers, politicians, whole neighborhoods, it didn't matter. Nobody was safe. From T.I. to Boozy Badazz to a laundry list of others, Charleston dropped names like bombs, flipping their fame into fuel for his wild brand of commentary. And that's why, when he spoke out for David, people couldn't just scroll past. Love him or hate him, Charleston had lived a life so raw that his words hit like battle cries, not just commentary. He didn't just critique, he cut throats with words. He attacked families, trashed parenting, smeared reputations. Every insult exploded online, every beef dragged in more eyeballs, and every time he did it, people were left wondering, was Charleston really spitting the truth, or was he just chasing clout at any cost? Take his clash with streamer Aiden Ross. In 2023, during a live stream, Charleston pepper sprayed one of Ross's boys on camera. The broadcast flipped into chaos instantly, sparking lawsuits and threats left and right. That single moment summed him up perfectly. Volatile, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. And he didn't stop there. He turned the volume higher. At a comedy show, instead of easing hecklers, he flashed stacks of cash in their faces, taunting and mocking until the place was in flames. Some laughed like it was peak comedy. Others swore it was proof Charleston wasn't a reformed activist at all, just an outraged junkie feeding off chaos. That's Charleston in one messy package. A contradiction made flesh. One minute he's condemning gangs and preaching accountability. The next he's mocking victims, clowning tragedies, and turning pain into punchlines. In September 2025, he went viral again after unloading on the family of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk right after his passing, brushing it off as just white-on-white crime. That single moment showed exactly who Charleston is. Half social critic, half troll, all chaos. So when Charleston White speaks, the world tunes in for two reasons. Either they think he's exposing ugly truths nobody else dares to touch, or they're waiting to see him trip over his own contradictions. Either way, his words move fast, sparking reactions across every platform. And that's exactly why his spotlight on David's case hits so hard.
Nothing else put him in jail just to put a hole on him.
A dead body found in your car?
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long?
This time, it wasn't just another rapper he was clowning, or a politician he couldn't stand. It was the system itself. His claim that David was innocent landed like a stick of dynamite because by then, Charleston's name wasn't tied to clean activism anymore. It was stitched together with scandals, hot takes, and viral explosions that made everything he said impossible to ignore. Charleston wasn't some outsider stumbling into the chaos. He was the chaos. And when he jumped into David's storm, It was like thunder cracking over a battlefield. Remember back in early 2024? He went viral after mocking the tragic endings of Chicago's King Von and Houston's Takeoff. He didn't just name drop, he laughed, dismissed their legacies, and called their deaths the natural result of street life. Those clips spread like wildfire, locking him in as the man who had no respect for sacred ground. That moment marked a shift. Charleston stopped looking like a reformed activist and became a full-blown antagonist. Then came the battle with Boozy Badazz. Charleston didn't just come for Boozy's music. He went after his family, blasting him as a failed father and claiming his choices were dragging his kids into the same destruction he once escaped. It wasn't shade, it was a direct hit at Boozy's bloodline. And when Boozy fired back, Charleston didn't retreat. He cranked it up, tossing out threats that blurred the line between twisted comedy and something dangerously real. To Charleston, it was just keeping it real. To critics, it was harassment at its rawest. And he didn't stop at entertainers. Cops caught the smoke too. He taunted police chiefs, clowned entire departments, and even bragged that he'd shoot any officer bold enough to test him. The contradictions stacked higher and higher. This was a man who preached against gang violence, while at the same time glorifying confrontation, chaos, and armed rebellion. But instead of drowning him, the chaos only fed him. Every insult, every feud, every viral meltdown, it all turned Charleston White into an even bigger beast. By 2025, he wasn't just an activist. He was a one-man media circus, a walking headline machine. Whether he was flashing guns on IG Live or roasting rappers to their faces in interviews, Charleston had mastered the art of turning controversy into cold, hard currency. So when he aimed his spotlight at David's case, plenty of critics rolled their eyes. To them, Charleston wasn't chasing truth. He was chasing clout. And honestly, what bigger story could a provocateur feast on than a teenage rap star accused of homicide? But here's the crazy twist. The more people dragged him for clout chasing, the bigger his voice got. Every swipe at his credibility only boosted his reach, pushing his defense of David deeper into the spotlight until ignoring it became impossible. Charleston didn't defend David in hushed interviews or private talks. He blasted it across YouTube, TikTok, and X, where millions couldn't look away. Clips of his rants, sometimes chopped up, sometimes stripped of context, racked up millions of views. Some laughed at him, others stitched his videos in agreement, and thousands dropped comments like, "I don't even like Charleston, but he ain't lying." That was his twisted power. Love him or hate him, Charleston White had you locked in. His credibility stayed under fire, yet somehow his influence only grew. Even his biggest haters couldn't stop engaging, and that's exactly why, when he jumped in as David's unlikely defender, the world froze and listened. Because when Charleston spoke, it wasn't just commentary, it was projection. To Charleston, David wasn't just another rapper caught in headlines. He was a reflection, a mirror of his own scars, his own history, maybe even a chance to rewrite his past through someone else's trial. For decades, Charleston had screamed the same warning. America doesn't need proof to lock up young black men. All it needs is suspicion. And that wasn't just theory for him. He lived it. At just 14, Charleston's whole life was rewritten by a prison sentence. One teenage mistake turned into a permanent scar, stamped on his name forever. That moment shaped the way he looked at every case, every arrest, every headline. And when he looked at David, he swore he saw the same trap, the kind designed to swallow young black men whole before they even get the chance to breathe. But this time, something felt different. The system hadn't made its move yet. And Charleston hammered it into the crowd. They don't let black men walk away from crimes like this in America. To him, that wasn't just a hot take, it was his truth. If the case against David was really airtight, Charleston swore the cops would have cuffed him already, just like they did to him as a kid. The fact David was still walking free, to Charleston that screamed innocence, yet under all the shouting and theatrics, there was a darker layer. David, like young Charleston once was a black man trapped in a story spinning out of his control. Guilty or innocent didn't even matter anymore. The court of public opinion had already branded him. And that pain? Charleston knew it too well. In David, he wasn't just defending a rapper, he was defending a reflection of himself. That was the twisted irony. The same man who laughed at fallen rappers, mocked victims, and built his fame by stirring chaos was now painting himself as a defender of justice. For a young star the world was ready to crucify. Whether you bought his argument or not, Charleston's role made the story impossible to look away from. Because in his mind, he wasn't only defending David, he was defending himself. His scars, his survival, and his unshakable belief that the system is never fair. But while Charleston's fiery defense burned across social media, the case itself kept shifting, with new leaks, shocking speculation, and chilling official updates that made the mystery even darker. Authorities finally confirmed the body in David's Tesla belonged to the missing 15-year-old girl who had rocked the community with her disappearance. The details were gruesome. Her remains dismembered, stuffed in the trunk, hidden in a way that screamed deliberate concealment. For the public, this looked like the smoking gun they had been waiting for.
Why would they let him walk this freely, only to lose endorsements and sponsorships and cancel shows and not his freedom? In the climate that we're in.
Yet law enforcement stayed stone-cold silent. Reporters begged for answers, but cops kept recycling the same lifeless phrase, "No arrests have been made at this time." That line turned into a broken record, looping across press conferences, news tickers, and headlines, fueling nothing but more confusion and doubt. Meanwhile, the internet did what it always does, twist tragedy into content. TikTok detectives tore through David's lyrics, dissecting songs like Romantic Homicide as if they were diary entries. Fans slowed his music videos frame by frame, swearing they spotted hidden confessions buried in the yard. Others lined up his tour schedule with the timeline of the girl's disappearance, trying to prove his shows overlapped with her final days. And still, despite all the viral theories and fan-made breakdowns, no hard evidence surfaced. No DNA results, no eyewitnesses, no digital trail tying David directly to the crime. Just rumors stacked on top of speculation and a mountain of circumstantial noise. But don't get it twisted. The case wasn't frozen. Behind the curtain, detectives were digging deep into digital footprints, tracing phone pings, and looping in interstate agencies. Leaks whispered the body might have even crossed state lines. This wasn't just a neighborhood tragedy anymore. It was turning into a tangled web stretching far wider than anyone imagined. And right in the middle of that storm stood Charleston White, his commentary now tipping into dangerous territory. By screaming David's innocence to millions, he wasn't just defending a rapper, he was rewriting the entire narrative in real time. Suddenly, hashtags like #FreeDavid and #Charleston said it exploded across X, with fans echoing his every word. That's the unsettling power of viral voices. They don't just react to news, they reshape it. And Charleston? He crowned himself the loudest pen in the story. His defense spread like wildfire, and the ripple effect slammed straight into mainstream media. Outlets that had been reporting with cold, clinical tones suddenly had to pivot. They weren't just covering David's case anymore. They were covering Charleston White himself, a man with no badge, no law degree, no official title, just a megaphone the world couldn't mute. Opinion columns popped up overnight, firing off takes like bullets. Some blasted Charleston as reckless, accusing him of poisoning a sensitive investigation by screaming innocent without a shred of proof. Others, though, gritting their teeth, admitted his point about the lack of an arrest wasn't completely off base. Love him or hate him, nobody could deny the truth. Charleston had yanked the David case into an even brighter, messier spotlight. And the fans, they split into warring armies. On one side stood David's loyalists, young, die-hard supporters clinging to Charleston's every word like gospel. They stitched his clips, quoted his wild analogies, and spread his mantra across the internet. If he really did it, he'd already be locked up. On the other side were the critics, furious, disgusted, calling Charleston's defense a slap in the face to the victim and her grieving family. Online fights got vicious fast, with users doxing each other, threatening each other, turning what should have been a tragic investigation into social media's nastiest battleground. Even big brands weren't safe. They were caught in the line of fire. Some had already backed away from David when the scandal first erupted, but now they were stuck. Do they cut ties completely and risk losing millions of loyal fans? Or do they stall? Terrified Charleston might be right and David could walk free? Endorsements froze in limbo, leaving David's career dangling. Not destroyed, but far from secure. Meanwhile, law enforcement wasn't bending to hashtags or viral clips. They rarely said Charleston's name, but subtle pushbacks crept through the cracks. Leaks whispered that investigators were grinding harder than ever, scrubbing hours of surveillance footage, combing through online messages, piecing together testimonies. Anonymous voices even hinted the lack of an arrest wasn't proof of innocence. It was prosecutors biding their time, refusing to rush charges and risk fumbling the case in court. But to Charleston, silence was the loudest proof. Every delay, every no comment, every vague press briefing became fresh fuel for his fire. He seized on it all as evidence the system had nothing. To him, the stall wasn't strategy, it was desperation. And the longer it dragged out, the louder his voice grew, pulling even more people into his corner. By now, the David case wasn't just about one horrific tragedy. It had exploded into a cultural battle. It wasn't just a homicide investigation anymore. It was a fight over race, justice, fame, and who really decides guilt in the viral age. And at the center of all that chaos, not a police chief, not a prosecutor, not even a journalist. It was Charleston White, louder than the cops, brasher than the lawyers, and more viral than the reporters trying to stick to the facts. As weeks stretched into months, the David case grew far beyond a single tragedy. It became a mirror reflecting how society chews up crime, celebrity, and controversy in the digital age. And standing right in the middle of that reflection was Charleston White, feeding the storm with every word he spoke. The official investigation dragged on. Slow, calculated, methodical. Detectives pieced together fragments of evidence, tracked down digital footprints, and worked with federal agencies across state lines. But while the system moved in silence, Charleston's voice thundered louder than ever. To David's fans, he wasn't just a commentator, he was hope. In a moment where the world seemed eager to bury their idol, Charleston gave them permission to keep believing. Flawed or not, his arguments handed fans a script to fight back against headlines. And in today's online world, sometimes the narrative smacks harder than the facts. Fans, critics, and media all got trapped in the same cycle. Waiting for charges, waiting for an arrest, waiting for clarity. And in that endless waiting game, Charleston thrived. Because the longer nothing happened, the stronger his words echoed. The case isn't closed. The truth still hides in the shadows. But one thing's undeniable. Charleston White didn't just join a national story. He hijacked it and rewrote the rhythm. He made David's innocence as loud and viral as the crime itself. He flipped speculation into debate, debate into content, and content into raw influence, keeping David's name alive in the court of public opinion. The fallout is still unfolding. David's career dangles in limbo, propped up by loyal fans but frozen out by a skeptical industry. Law enforcement faces their biggest gamble yet. If they move without airtight proof, Charleston's words will come back to haunt them. And for the public, this case stands as a chilling reminder of how easily truth can be twisted into clicks, clips, and commentary. So what do you think about Charleston White's shocking defense of D4vd? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video so more people can join the conversation. And don't forget, click the cards on your screen to dive into more stories just like this. See you on the next one.